The landline only rings for church ladies and wrong numbers, so when it sang at 12:17 a.m. and a young woman with a careful voice asked if Calder had arrived at the La Estrella Inn Midland yet, the floor under my bare feet felt a degree colder. She caught herself, breathed a tiny "Oh, I'm so sorry," and hung up before I could decide whether to be polite or furious. The name on the caller ID was Vale Poppy, a nothing name that slid off the tongue like a cough drop. And I stood there in our kitchen in Nacogdoches with the fridge humming, the cat's tail flicking at the corner, the oven clock stuck at 1:03 for the third month straight, thinking about that hotel with carpet as blue as chlorinated pools and a lobby that smelled like citrus cleaner and tired men. Calder had kissed my temple at 9, loading his leather duffel like it weighed feathers, murmuring something about the Permian accounts and a breakfast with a field superintendent who chewed tobacco during meetings. The trip was 2 nights, he said, no, 3 at most if the Friday numbers were ugly, and another peck, and a little joke about missing my lopsided pancakes. I rinsed my glass, set it upside down, and let the landline sit there. The kind of mute witness that can't lie. If you've been married longer than a decade, you know there are 2 kinds of silence. The one where a house settles and the one where the air holds its breath and watches you figure out whether you'll open a door or pretend there isn't one. I dialed the last incoming number before courage fled. It went to voicemail. Her voice was the same. Poppy here, leave what you need for Monday's docket, thanks. Docket. Not a word our oil services world used. Docket belonged to lawyers, to polished wood and silver pens. Calder's company shared a floor with a boutique law firm downtown, Dukes and Adler, where the paralegals wore cream blouses and shoes that made no sound. He'd once mentioned a temp secretary who kept misplacing courier slips. A coincidence will sit on your shoulder and whisper that you're dramatic. A second coincidence will press a finger to your sternum. I pulled up the La Estrella's number and asked if a Mr. Calder Rowan had checked in. The clerk said he had a reservation but the key hadn't been picked up. My throat narrowed so fast I had to sip water in tiny, ridiculous bird motions. Where are you, Calder? I texted it and stared at the tiny status bubble that did nothing. The last text from him was a picture of a motel sign along 59, pink neon dripping through mist. Captioned, "Romance isn't dead." Maybe he was making a joke at me now. Maybe he was parked at a gas station gulping coffee and talking shop with a man who wore boots to bed. Maybe his phone died. People leave their phones in bathrooms, at truck stops, on roofs of cars. People with wives who sleep with the landline on a chair beside the bed. At 12:31 a.m., the landline rang again. Same number. This time I didn't say hello. I said, "Poppy, why are you calling my house to ask where my husband is?" There was a hiccup, a soft clatter in the background like keys or bracelets, and then, "Oh Lord. Mrs. Rowan, I meant to dial the front desk at the Estrella, I'm so embarrassed. I thought he'd be there by now, Mr. Rowan texted an hour ago that he was nearly in town, the part of my brain that makes grocery lists and remembers library due dates stepped forward and took the wheel. Why are you tracking my husband's arrival at a hotel after midnight? Her inhale sharpened. I'm his secretary, she said, and it came out too fast, as if rehearsed. Secretaries don't confirm midnight arrivals unless someone else needs the room key at the same time. I glanced at the oven clock that lied to me and at the landline that didn't. Does your boss know you're placing these calls? I asked, and she said, very small, Duke knows. Yes, Mr. Duke, which landed like a misfired nail because Duke as in Dukes and Adler. The firm with the silent shoes, not Calder's boss at all. A second clatter, hissed whispering not to someone on her phone but to someone near her. Then a rushed good night and the line went empty. I didn't throw the phone, I set it down like it could bruise. The cat nosed my ankle. Streetlights turned the magnolia leaves outside to coins. I grabbed my keys, the Buick's dome light made my knuckles look like someone else's. And I drove the way you drive to hospitals when names get spoken too gently. The highway to Lufkin was a black ribbon with stitched headlights. Billboards offering injury settlements and fireworks and a Jesus with sleeve tattoos. I didn't put music on. I let the car tell me its one story. Steady hum, steady hum. Don't think about hands that aren't yours. The Estrella rose off the interstate like a mirage, 4 stories of tan stucco. Flags moving in lazy arcs. The clerk wore a navy vest and a sympathy smile. Can I help you? I said my husband's name and watched his eyes slip to the monitor. Not checked in, ma'am. Reservation for 2 queens. 2 queens. Our house owns 1 bed that sags in the middle from our weight and our arguing and our forgiveness. 2 queens suggests coworkers splitting costs. 2 queens suggests a secretary who accidentally calls at midnight. 2 queens suggests lies. I asked if he could call the number on file and he did, cheerful, as if we were playing a game. It went to voicemail. Calder again, say the thing quick. His laugh. The one I used to love because it curled at the edges. I pictured a roadside motel with a humming ice machine and a door that doesn't quite latch. The place he'd stop if the Estrella felt too clean for what he intended. When I reached for my phone to see if the little status bubble had changed, I noticed a new text, timestamp 12:44 a.m. From an unknown number. Lane open behind the car wash, park far right. Don't leave the key in the door this time. The punctuation was wrong in a way I knew from living in someone's sentences for years. Calder uses weird colons where they don't belong. Whoever wrote this didn't. I showed the clerk my phone like a deputy's badge. Do y'all have a car wash nearby? He pointed out toward the access road, where a self-serve bay crouched lonely. I drove there because sometimes the only way to make the air breathe again is to make a bad idea move forward. The lot was mostly empty except for a white Tacoma backed into the far right, dust on its bumper spelling someone's name because a finger had dragged there. The cab was empty. The passenger seat held a bouquet wrapped something that wasn't flowers. A stack of file folders, a thin laptop, a navy cardigan with a stitched tag, Poppy V. I stood in the wet light smell of detergent and concrete, my own breath louder than traffic. And opened the top folder because my hands were already guilty. Inside were hotel printouts, room assignments, a typed schedule. Midland Client Outreach, Rowan, Landrum, and beneath it, discretion brief, Mrs. are likely to call, then my name spelled out, Ione Merrick Rowan. With notes I didn't understand, prefers landline. Hesitates before asking directly. Keep tone warm. There was a photo clipped to the back, grainy, from a church picnic last fall. Me holding a tray of deviled eggs, a little blur of Calder in the corner. And the caption in pen, wife, tidy, listens. My mouth tasted like pennies. A soft step behind me, then a woman's voice in the polite register of someone who has a pill under her tongue. Mrs. Rowan, you're not supposed to see that. I turned around and finally met Poppy Vale. She was shorter than her phone voice. Wearing flats and a navy dress with a hem that tried not to flutter in the night air. Her hair was that careful blonde of women who do not leave things to chance. She held out her hands, not to touch, just to show emptiness. He asked me to help, she said, and the lie arrived with the truth inside it. Like one of those nested dolls. Help with what? I said. And the answer landed between us like a glass sliding off a counter and not shattering yet. With the surprise. Not for you. For the client. For a woman whose name wasn't mine. And then I heard the Tacoma's driver's side door unlock from someone's fob around the corner. And the person who rounded the bay was not my husband. It was Duke from Dukes and Adler, the silent shoesman himself. Face stung with the kind of surprise that forgets how to smile. And I understood at once that whatever Calder had been doing on these trips, he wasn't doing it alone, and the word secretary had been nothing more than a curtain hung between me and an entirely different stage. The car wash light buzzed like an insect about to die, flickering across Duke's face as he froze with his key fob still raised. And Poppy shifted her weight just enough that I saw her pulse jump at her neck. He wasn't supposed to see me, that much was obvious from the way his jaw locked. From the way his gaze darted to the open folder in my hands. He said my name like a reprimand, like a teacher catching a student somewhere forbidden, Ione. Not Mrs. Rowan, not ma'am, just Ione, as though he owned the right. I wanted to slam the folder shut, but my hands stayed open, stubborn. The silence between us wasn't clean. It dragged with it the hiss of water dripping in the wash bay and the sound of my own breath, stuttering like I'd been running. Duke stepped closer, and Poppy murmured something that sounded like don't, but he ignored her, plucking the folder from me with fingers too calm. He glanced over the notes, then tucked them neatly back into the bouquet wrap, as if tidiness might erase what I'd seen. Calder, I asked, though my throat didn't want the word. Where is he? Duke's eyes did a thing I'd only seen in courtrooms on television, shuddered, calculated, then softened into something counterfeit. He'll be here soon, he said. It was the wrong answer because it wasn't an answer at all. Poppy turned away as if distance could protect her. But her shoes squeaked faintly against the wet cement, betraying her. I felt the tilt of the night, the way the truth wanted to spill but couldn't decide whose lips would break first. You've been tracking me, I said, louder than I meant to. The photo. The notes. That's not about him, that's about me. Duke didn't blink. He just said, we needed to know if you'd interfere. Interfere with what? I wanted to shout, but the words thinned at the edges, leaving only the raw ache of betrayal sitting heavy in my chest. A sound cut through then, low, steady, a car engine pulling into the lot. Headlights washed us all in white, blinding for a breath. I shielded my face and stepped back, heart ricocheting. Because the car that pulled up wasn't Calder's sedan. It was a dark SUV, windows tinted, and when the passenger door opened, Calder stepped out. His shirt untucked, hair mussed. And the expression on his face when he spotted me under that buzzing light wasn't shock, it was irritation, like I had arrived too early to a rehearsal he hadn't finished staging. Calder didn't speak at first, he just rubbed his temple like the sight of me standing there with Poppy and Duke was a migraine he hadn't budgeted for. And I couldn't tell if the night air was hot or if my skin was just burning from the inside out. The SUV's driver stayed hidden, engine idling, headlights still on us, making every flaw in Calder's face look harsher, creases deeper, jaw tighter. Eyes unable to land on mine for more than a second. I asked him, plain as the asphalt beneath us, what the hell is going on? He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally muttered, you shouldn't have come. That's all. Not denial. Not explanation. Just the kind of dismissal that makes a body feel like furniture. Left out in the rain. Poppy shifted closer to Duke. Her hands clasped so hard the knuckles paled, and for a beat I thought maybe she'd intervene. Maybe tell the truth he was too cowardly to put into words. But Duke gave the tiniest shake of his head and she shrank back. Calder tried again, voice lower, almost coaxing. Ione, just get in your car and go home. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk then. He said it like a bribe, like if I played obedient wife a little longer, he'd throw me a scrap of truth. But the SUV door behind him opened wider. And a woman's laugh, light, careless, entirely at ease, spilled out. My body moved before my mind did. I stepped toward the vehicle, and Calder's hand shot out, fingers closing around my wrist. Grip firm enough to stop me but not firm enough to hide his panic. Don't, he hissed, and that's when I understood. Whatever story he'd spun about work trips and late meetings wasn't just infidelity tangled with some secretary's nerves. This was layered, orchestrated. A stage with actors who knew their cues. And I, stupid enough to follow the echo of a midnight phone call, had stumbled into the wrong act of a play that was never written for me. His grip on my wrist was hot and trembling. Not the steady hand of a husband holding on but the desperate clutch of a man caught mid-lie. And before I could yank free, the woman from the SUV leaned out into the headlights, hair glossy, lips painted a dark plum, dress too fine for a parking lot at midnight. She said his name like it was hers to say, Calder, come on, we're late. And the sound of it from her mouth was worse than the sight of her hand resting casual on the car door. He let go of me so quickly I almost staggered. And the absence of his touch burned harder than the grip. I stared at him, waiting for denial, waiting for rage. Waiting for anything that might make me believe this wasn't as filthy and deliberate as it looked, but all he gave me was a glance full of resignation. Like he'd already chosen the side of the story where I didn't belong. Duke cleared his throat as if to remind us he was still stage managing this scene. And Poppy's face folded into a practiced neutrality, a secretary's mask. I asked the woman, raw in my throat, who are you? She smiled, slow, unhurried, like my devastation was just a detail she'd been warned about. And said, I'm the reason he won't be coming home. The words didn't echo, they sank, heavy and absolute. And for a second the buzzing light overhead seemed to dim. The whole car wash bay swallowing the air. Calder didn't correct her, didn't flinch. He only shut his eyes as if that might erase me standing there. As if the marriage we built was already paperwork in a drawer he'd forgotten to sign. The laugh from the SUV lingered like perfume while the night around us held its breath. And I felt myself split, one part wanting to scream until the street lamps shattered. The other part watching everything with cold clarity. Memorizing details the way you memorize the face of someone who's about to become a stranger. Calder moved toward the open door. And the woman slid over with a confidence that told me this wasn't their first rehearsal. Her purse was already on his seat, as if she'd been riding there for months. Poppy muttered something to Duke, voice too soft to catch. And he gave her the kind of nod bosses give when an assistant has done exactly what she was told. I asked again, quieter this time, why? And it wasn't the kind of question built for answers, it was the kind that hangs in the air like smoke. Calder's shoulders sagged, his tie loose, his shirt damp at the collar. He looked older than he had the night before, older than the years we'd carried together. He said, "Ione, this doesn't concern you," and that was when the fury cut through the numbness. Sharp and merciless. I told him it concerned me the day I took his name. The day I carried his children who never lived long enough to breathe. The day I turned down my own promotion so he could travel. The words hit him, but he didn't catch them. He just stood there, staring at the concrete as if it offered a script. The woman in the SUV tapped her nails against the dashboard, impatient. Like I was the intermission no one wanted. Duke stepped forward, low and firm. "Mrs. Rowan, it's best you leave now." And in his tone I finally heard it, the warning. The threat braided into civility. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't just infidelity tangled with secrecy. It was a deal, a partnership, something calculated that demanded my absence. They hadn't just replaced me in Calder's bed. They had erased me from whatever life he'd built beyond it. I should have walked away then, saved what little dignity hadn't already been scraped raw. But something in me, maybe spite, maybe survival, refused to give them the clean exit they expected. Instead I stepped closer to the SUV, close enough that the woman's perfume drifted out. Sweet and chemical, like cherries soaked in cough syrup. She tilted her head, unbothered. And I saw the glint of a wedding ring on her hand, not Calder's, not mine, something newer. Sleeker. She wasn't just his mistress, she was tethered to someone else too. I pointed at her hand before my voice even caught up. "Does he know you wear another man's ring while riding in his car?" For the first time that night, her smile faltered. Calder barked my name, sharp, a sound that cracked through the lot. But he didn't step between us. He couldn't. Because he knew I was telling a truth too loud to ignore. Duke muttered something under his breath, Poppy gasped. And the woman's eyes flicked back toward the tinted window where the driver still sat waiting. That driver, silent all this time, shifted and the dome light caught his face for half a second. I froze. It wasn't a stranger. It was Landrum, Calder's supposed client. The man from the spreadsheets and field visits, the excuse for every late night. He wasn't waiting for a ride, he was orchestrating it. The affair wasn't just an affair. It was a transaction, a network, and I was the variable they'd miscalculated. My phone buzzed in my pocket then, a text from an unknown number, words glowing like a blade. "You weren't supposed to be here." The text burned on my screen, its letters too neat, too knowing. And when I lifted my eyes, Calder was watching me with a kind of resignation that looked like relief, as though the truth being out saved him the trouble of another lie. Landrum leaned across the driver's seat, window rolling down slow, his voice calm, almost kind. "Mrs. Rowan, it's better if you don't dig any deeper." He said it like a promise wrapped in a threat, and the woman beside Calder finally looked away, her ringed hand tightening on her purse. I wanted to scream, to claw, to demand every sordid detail. But instead a steadier instinct took over, the one that had carried me through miscarriages. Through nights when Calder came home smelling of travel and silence. I slid my phone into my pocket without answering, turned to Calder, and told him flat. "You've already made your choice, but don't forget, I know how to make mine." His lips parted, maybe to beg, maybe to warn, but I didn't stay to find out. I walked back to my Buick with the night air heavy against my skin, keys biting my palm. Every step louder than the last. Behind me I heard the SUV door slam, an engine rev, the sound of people leaving together. Their secrets intact, but in the passenger seat of my car, waiting like it had been planted, lay another manila folder, this one thinner, addressed in careful handwriting to me. Inside, a single sheet. Sometimes betrayal is the only way to tell the truth. No signature. No explanation. Just the beginning of a story I hadn't asked for. One that wasn't finished using my husband's name.